Welcome to Project Play Summit 2021, the nation's premier gathering of leaders building healthy children and communities through sports. I'm Tom Farrey, founder of Project Play and the Aspen Institute's Sports and Society program. This year, as we did last year, we gather virtually due to the challenges presented by a devastating pandemic that is sadly still with us. The good news, this event is entirely free this year and online, so anyone can join us for any of the interactive sessions we hope can help you in your work. More good news, the summit returns in person next year, and we're not going to wait until the fall to convene our network of networks. We're moving the event to the spring, March 9th in Washington, D.C. at the historic Andrew W. Mellon Auditorium on Constitution Avenue, just across from the Smithsonian. You can register for the 2022 Summit starting now. Tonight, we open early bird registration for our signature event. See the link in the chat box on this page. Don't wait. As always at our in-person summit, we have limited capacity and the event sells out well in advance. This is the first time in 3 years that we'll all be together again, and we're planning a robust agenda, including ideas on how to partner with schools and build more equitable, child-centric programs. As always, the summit is where leaders take measure of the nation's state of play and chart next steps in driving systems-level change in sports. And wow, do we have a lot to share and explore tonight and tomorrow in our sessions. Last year, as COVID-19 concerns sidelined millions of young people, Project Play recognized not just the challenge before us, but also the opportunity before all of us to build a better youth sports system coming out of the pandemic, one that is better aligned with the shared principles of sport for all, play for life that have guided Project Play since release of its playbook and the first summit in 2015. To lay the groundwork, we sourced 4 tactics from our network and made them our call for leadership, or action items, in last year's State of Play report. I'm happy to share that progress has been made in each opportunity. Number 1, recognize the right of every child to play. That's how Aspen phrased the concept. A working group of human rights and sports policy experts broadened it to include the human rights that children have when engaged in programs led by adults. The Children's Bill of Rights in Sports was released in August, a resource to help foster a shared cultural understanding that that all youth have the right to play and to develop as people through sports. At launch, more than 60 organizations endorsed the Bill of Rights. Among them, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, YMCA of USA, National Recreation and Park Association, Little League International, ESPN, Under Armour, Hospital for Special Surgery, UNICEF USA, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, and more than a dozen national governing bodies of sports, including the U.S. Soccer Federation, U.S. Tennis Association, USA Baseball, and USA Hockey. Since then, many more have joined from the 8 sectors that touch the lives of children. Join them. That level of embrace prompted Inge Anderson, one of the architects of Norway's world-renowned sports system, to call the Bill of Rights, quote, the biggest paradigm change in U.S. sport in your modern sport history, for centering the needs, voice, and best interests of the child in the design of programs. What's next? Sport providers implementing these principles. Tomorrow during the summit, we talk with leaders from 2 national organizations that already are using the Bill of Rights to review and improve their programs. We also talk with Lily Loom, CEO of USA Gymnastics, the first NGB to implement an athlete Bill of Rights, in their case in response to accounts of widespread abuse in the sport. The second call to action in last year's platform was to enhance the capacity of local providers. The pandemic has made clear the need for community-based, low-cost, accessible programs that can engage kids at scale. Part of the solution is getting more coaches trained in key competencies, so parents don't feel that early forming travel teams are the only real option. The pandemic limited the amount of progress that could be made here. Park and rec staff around the country got laid off. Many small nonprofit providers struggled to survive. But on the upside, many kids played on their own, The surge in participation in sports and activities like golf, tennis, surfing, biking, and ultimate frisbee underscore the importance of the family as the local sport provider. Our third call to action was fun community-based play. Huge advances here. For the first time since 1965, the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund began to receive full, permanent funding, $900 million a year to restore not just national parks, but local recreation and sports sites. The Biden administration then carved out $150 million just for urban communities. Also, New York became the first state to legalize sports betting with a dedicated cut to youth sports, a model Aspen conceptualized and around which members of the Project Play network rallied. What's next? Taking that model to other states. We have a panel tomorrow that explains how to do this where you live. Finally, number 4, embrace sports governance. As you know, the purpose of governance in any realm, at any level, is to balance competing interests. The need for as much in youth sports only grew as the pandemic raged on. Public health authorities set restrictions on return to play to limit the spread of the virus. Some providers and parents pushed back hard, lobbying overwhelmed governors who lack institutional expertise in sports programming. This year, the question has been raised by legislators in a couple states. Do we need state-based oversight of youth sports to address all sorts of issues, from access to abuse? We have a panel on that during this year's summit. We also have keynote conversations with Jeremy Lin, as well as World Cup champion soccer players Alex Morgan, Sydney Leroux, Ali Krieger, and Ashlyn Harris, and so much more. In each session, you'll see an ideas box where you can share your thoughts live. Please join us there as we take these conversations to the next level. On social media, please use the hashtag #ProjectPlay. To get us started, I'd like to introduce John Solomon, who will share insights on the nation's state of play for youth.
Thanks, Tom. The state of play in 2021 is improving as families feel more comfortable to return. Still, there are significant challenges ahead, especially since kids under 12 entered the fall ineligible to be vaccinated, and so many more kids are now out of shape. The CDC found that 22% of children and teens are obese during the pandemic, an alarming increase from 19% before COVID-19. Each year, Project Play collects and analyzes youth sports participation figures from the previous year provided by the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. During COVID-19, we have also conducted periodical surveys with Utah State University to understand parent and child experiences in real time. All of this information is available in our National State of Play 2021 report by visiting as.pn/SOP 2021. The good news, more kids are playing sports than a year ago. 47% of youth sports parents said in September their child has resumed sports at the same level as before the pandemic. That's up from 40% 5 months earlier. 17% of children resumed playing at a higher level than before COVID. The average child between ages 6 to 18 played 11 hours per week in September. That's slightly down from April, but up 57% from where we were a year ago. Unfortunately, which kids regularly play sports is again determined by money. 24% of youth in the highest income bracket have resumed sports at a greater level than before the pandemic. That number is only 13 to 14% for their peers from lower income brackets. There are still fears about returning to sports. Half of all youth sports parents view their child becoming sick as a potential barrier to resume play. Yet parent comfort levels with children playing travel sports, community-based sports, and school sports are the highest they have been during the pandemic. For those families who do want to return, they may be coming back to diminished services. 13% of youth sports parents indicated their community-based sports provider closed due to COVID-19, and another 12% said it merged with another organization. In total, more than 4 of 10 families said their community-based sports provider has either closed, merged, or returned with limited capacity. These changes could result in a profound impact on the quality and accessibility of programs. Travel sports parents report similar issues. 15% say their travel-based provider closed during COVID-19, 8% merged with another league or club, and 23% return with limited capacity. Finally, there's the question of how many children will remain interested in sports. When Project Play in Utah State conducted its first COVID-19 survey in June 2020, 19% of youth sports parents said their child was not interested in playing sports. By September 2021, that figure was 28%. The more money a family has, the less interest a child has in sports these days. Worth considering? Maybe sports before COVID-19 was never good for many children, and they need a new experience in order to return. With that, I want to briefly bring in Travis Dorsch. He's founding director of Utah State University's Families and Sports Lab, which partner with Project Play on these COVID-19 surveys. So what trends are you going to look for in the next year to determine the impact of COVID-19 on the state of play?
Well, a number of trends, John, and I appreciate the question, and I think you did a nice job laying out some of the most pertinent from our data collections. But really, the one that stands out to me, and there's two, but I'll start with this, and that is the calculus that parents are using to decide whether or not their kids are coming back, right? And if you think about these measurables that we've had in these surveys, we've measured parents' fear of illness for themselves and for their young people. And you mentioned in your intro here that roughly half of the youth sport parents that we surveyed suggested that they fear either for themselves or their children's illness if they're to go back to sports. So that's one trend line that I'll be very interested in following. And really, when you juxtapose that on top of the understanding that parents really trust the people at the grassroots level the most, in other words, their coaches, their organizational leaders, much more than they might community, state, and national leaders when it comes to COVID-19, the vaccines, the implementation of any restrictions. So I'll be following that very closely, how much fear there is in the parent population around their kids coming back to sports. And then the second trend line that I really want to follow is this idea of athlete outcomes. We think about sports so often, John, as this context that creates positive outcomes for youth. But when we measure children's mental health, their physical fitness, their emotional control, and their social well-being, anywhere from 25 to 30% of parents said that in these four categories, their children were actually getting worse during COVID-19. So it seems that sport hasn't really been given the platform or the opportunity to do what we know it can do when designed and delivered well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the big trend lines that we're going to keep looking at moving forward. Thanks so much for joining us, Travis. Thank you again for your support with all of the data. It's really terrific research. And again, you can find the entire National State of Play 2021 report by visiting as.pn/SOP 2021. Hi, I'm John Solomon, editorial director of the Aspen Institute Sports and Society program. Welcome to our conversation with UNICEF ambassador and pro basketball player Jeremy Lin as we talk about mental health and racial equity in youth sports. 2 years after going undrafted by the NBA, Jeremy joined the New York Knicks in 2012 as one of the few Asian Americans to ever play in the NBA. Jeremy's immediate success, commonly referred to as Linsanity, turned him into an overnight sensation. It wasn't until recently, when Jeremy began working with a sports psychologist, that he says he realized the emotional and racial trauma he was carrying, starting as a child. What is it like for a child to navigate anxiety and encounter racism in sports? How can we create a more welcoming environment for more kids to talk openly about mental health, so they enjoy all of the benefits that come with playing sports and being physically active? That's what we're going to discuss today. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm excited.
So you often talk about navigating anxiety and your efforts to eliminate the stigma of mental health challenges. What do you remember about your mental health as a child, including in sports?
Yeah, I think as children, we're also, easily, we're very impressionable. And so, for me, I just realized there were certain modes of thinking that were just kind of ingrained, right? Like suck it up, tough it out, don't never show weakness, just fight through it. And there's truth to these principles. So there's perseverance and resilience and confidence and different things that are embedded in these. But I also realized that there were some things where if it wasn't guided, if I didn't understand how to apply the principles or the truth behind these sayings, that I could get really lost into other things. And so I realized that I started to suppress a lot of my emotions. And instead of, I started to shame myself in terms of what I felt, and having guilt. And so I think, specifically it'd be like, I had maybe tremendous anxiety or fear before a game, and I couldn't really process what it was. But in my mind, I just kept thinking to myself, like, something, something's wrong with me, or this isn't real, or whatever. And I would just suppress it and try to pretend like it didn't exist. And I think for me, realizing that mode of thinking, that line of thinking, can be really, really detrimental down the road. It's not something that I understood in the moment. And so it wasn't until I got older that, as I look back, I realized, I do think that had I paid more attention to the mental side of the game and more value on my mental health, that I could have gone through different experiences as a child, as an athlete, much differently and much more healthy. And because of that, what I see now is I'm going to therapy, and I have a sports psychologist and people who help me just to understand my past experiences and how do I elevate my game mentally. And so that's kind of the journey that I'm on, and that's why I'm excited to be here and to share a little bit of my experience.
That's awesome. It's really important, for I think kids to hear that, and to have that honest dialogue and hearing from athletes like you. For kids that aren't talking to anyone, what do you think prevents them from opening up? Looking back, it's many years for you, but why do you think you didn't necessarily open up or recognize it back then?
For me, it's easy. It's pride. It was ego. And again, society has elevated that player who is so confident, they predict something before the game, and then they go out and do it. And they're like, I'm gonna score 40, we're gonna win, and then we're gonna go get a championship, and then it happens. And these are like very extreme cases, and sometimes they're even exaggerated. They're not always true. I don't know if I know a single athlete who doesn't struggle with fear. But when you watch the videos, the season recaps and the highlights, and you read the newspaper, and it's like watching somebody play and you only see their highlights. If you only see their highlights, you don't see their mistakes and their struggles and everything up until that point. All the normal, mundane aspects of their game. You only see the best, coolest part. And I think that's a bad comparison when you're trying to talk about, who do I want to be as a player? And so when I was young, it would just be, I'd watch Jordan and I would see just how confident he was. And I just felt like I had to be that. And it was my pride that prevented me from maybe sharing a little bit more about the fears that I felt. And what I started to understand is that every athlete, when you're young, when you're old, like, it doesn't matter what level that you're playing at, you will have fears at certain points in your career or in your experiences, and that it's okay, and that you need to talk it out, because if you don't talk it out, one, that fear can really impact you on and off the court or the field. And then two, you might not be able to know how to navigate it or get beyond it. And I love this quote, or this saying that I read, but it talks about the fact that courage is, what allows people to fight through their fear. It's not that you don't feel fear at all. And I think that's something that kids need to really understand, is you're going to feel fear, and that's okay, because everybody feels that. It's whether that fear cripples you and doesn't allow you to move forward. That's actually what the most important thing is. And so can we talk about it with other people so that they can give us courage and encouragement to fight through the fears? That is a huge difference that, I wish I learned, 20 years ago.
That's terrific. And when you talk about fears, do you mean like fear of failures back like when you were a kid? Or is there something else that you fear?
It's fear, it could be anything, right? And I think at different points when I was playing basketball, I had different fears. And so maybe at certain points it'd be fear of failure, right? Or fear of a bad game, or fear of being embarrassed or looking embarrassed, or maybe it's fear of not living up to the expectations of somebody else, or of a coach, of a team, of my school, of my classmates. Maybe it's fear of injury. Maybe it's it could be fear of letting down your parents. It could be fear. It could be fear towards your coach or the way that he's looking at you. There could be so many different elements of fear, but ultimately, yeah, I struggled with every last one of those at a different point in my life. But fear was everywhere. And, as and I can share some examples about as I got older, even when I got into the NBA, just how bad my anxiety and my fear really was.
You've been really candid about your struggles with anxiety, and I think it's going back to high school. How bad did it get? How did you learn to manage this anxiety? And did sports play any role in that?
Sports was a huge role in that. And I remember my rookie year, my rookie year with the Golden State Warriors, I could not eat before games. I could not sleep. I couldn't eat the night before. Like, it got so bad. I had to talk on the phone with my agent for 2 hours or 3 hours before each game so that he could encourage me and give me the courage to go onto that court and play as close to fearless as I could. And I struggled. And for a whole year, I couldn't do it. I played, but I played with tremendous fear. And I struggled and I struggled and I struggled. But I fought and I kept going and I kept moving forward. It wasn't because of my own strength. My family came around me. My agent was there. My friends, they would come and visit me. My parents would stay with me on the road to make sure that I was okay. They pushed me through. And the next year was Linsanity, when I was the breakout player. I made history, things that had never been done in the game of basketball. I was literally the most popular person on the planet, actually. And it came because I was finally able to let go of this anxiety and this fear. The interesting thing about it is about 3 weeks into Linsanity, that anxiety came back. And I started to think, why is it that I still, I'm struggling to eat and sleep before games? I mean, I'm playing better than anybody in the world ever thought I could play. Why do I still have this anxiety and this fear? It's because I was anxious because I wanted to be who everybody else wanted me to be. I wanted to be this Linsanity phenomenon. And the fear of not being who everybody else wanted me to be, which was this mega star who came onto the scene and just broke all these records. I was trying so hard to live up to everyone else's expectations of me that the fear and the anxiety came rushing back. And I had to readdress it within myself. And that's where my faith came in, understanding that there's nothing that I can do on or off the court that is gonna make me make God love me less or make my identity less as a person, right? I might not be as good a basketball player. I might not have played well tonight, but that doesn't make me any less of a person.
You've talked recently about how you didn't realize for a long time that you were carrying so much racial and emotional trauma. And I know that you shared you're comfortable revisiting your childhood with us today to help others by sharing your experience. Can you share what you remember about how you were treated as an Asian American when playing sports?
For me, I just never felt like I belonged. I remember I would show up to the basketball court and it was either people would be laughing at me or they'd be looking at me like I was crazy, like they'd never seen me before, like I was an alien. Or they would tell me like, hey, this is the basketball court, like, volleyball is not on until after this game, or they would say things like that. They would call me racist names, racist jokes. They would call me Yao Ming. They'd do everything. They would fight and argue over who gets to guard me because they all thought that I was going to be an easy matchup and they would dominate me. I never felt like just a basketball player. I never walked onto the court and was like, I'm just like one of these guys. I was always, that's the Asian basketball player. And what it ended up doing was it helped me in some ways because it gave me resilience. It gave me perseverance. It taught me how to tune out the noise of my opponents. And it gave me a chip on my shoulder. But at the same time, there's a lot of trauma that comes with that. Thinking that no one will ever believe in me. No one will ever help me or want to, or actually think that I'm good enough. Even when I got to the NBA, there was never one player that really took me under his wing and said, hey, I believe in you. Because my teammates didn't until I proved myself. And then they believed in me. And so that trauma of always kind of being the first, breaking the mold, being a trailblazer, not realizing that that really takes a toll. And before I knew it, it was like I couldn't trust anybody. I thought everybody that was out to get me. I felt like I had to go and earn everybody's respect. I felt like it was just me against the world, always an uphill climb. And a lot of this baggage, if I don't address it and let go of it at some point, I'm going to burn out and I'm going to run out of energy. I'm not going to be able to enjoy my experiences. Even when I win, even when I play well, I won't be able to see it as that because I'll be filled with this anger inside of me. These are all things that I've experienced, that I've been through. That's why I'm sharing this right now. And realizing that it's not until I started to talk through things, I started to reconcile with people, I started to have conversations I never thought I would have with people that have hurt me, that I was able to let it go. And when I started to let it go, I just started to enjoy the game. I stopped looking at everybody as an enemy or somebody I had to prove wrong. I just started to be myself and just be the best Jeremy, be the best, Jeremy Lin basketball player that I could be on the court. And that's what I was just focused on, instead of opponent X, Y, and Z and proving them wrong or making them eat their words and playing out of this place of, bitterness and hatred.
Right. No, that's powerful. I think there are a lot of kids who experience racism in our country and in various settings, including sports, unfortunately. And kids sometimes can't maybe put into words or be able to articulate exactly what they're feeling. And it sounds like you sort of experienced that as a child. What advice do you have any child today who experiences racism in sports? Like, what do you wish Jeremy Lin, the child, would have done back then, now that you have the hindsight and perspective, of course, of Jeremy Lin, the adult?
I mean, I wish I told myself, and I'll share the story when I was, playing in college, somebody called me probably the worst racial slur that you could call, an Asian. And I ended up self-combusting. I had a terrible game. I lost my cool. And it was a really important game. And afterwards, one of my assistant coaches pulled me to the side and he said, and he shared his experience, and he's an African-American, and he played at Duke University, and he explained how when people are racist towards you, one is because they're ignorant, they don't know any better. Two, it's because they've been hurt themselves, and they often say like bullies bully others because they're hurt themselves. Hurt people try to hurt other people. And I think that's something that I had to understand, is when someone is trying to hurt me, one, they've probably been hurt themselves before. And number two, when they give me this negative energy, it's my job to, learn how to take that negative energy and turn it into positive energy. When someone says something racist to you, this is what I wish I told myself. When someone says something racist towards me, I wish that I could have, at a younger age, learned how to take that negative energy and turn it into more focus and more determination to just focus on myself to play even better and turn that into positive energy. Because what ends up happening is they tried to hurt me with their words, and it actually helped me and pushed me in the right direction. But if you're not able to do that, then it pushes you in the other direction. And so these instances, these circumstances are like forks in the road. They can put you in one trajectory or another, and it's on you to figure out, how do you want to handle what has happened to you, even though it's not right, even though it's not fair. After the game too, I definitely think you should talk to people, talk about your experiences, share. And I think even having a conversation with the person that said it to you, I wouldn't be opposed to that. And just saying, hey, I don't understand why you're saying that. Where are you coming from? And just being open and talking about it. It takes a lot of courage, but I'm a big believer in it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. On a different subject a little bit, we have an initiative at Project Play called Reimagining School Sports. And this is a project that's studying ways to get more students playing sports or being physically active at high schools. And our national survey of high school students found that Asian American youth have lost interest in sports during COVID more than any other race or ethnicity. I wonder if you have any thoughts as to why you think many Asian American youth haven't come back to sports during the pandemic.
And I think there's definitely many reasons. It's impossible to explain it so simply with just one reason. But, one thing I do know is mental health is a huge problem in the Asian American community right now, because of COVID, but also because of the violence towards Asians. And what we've seen actually is, I think it said there's some stat like 80% or something like that, like some staggering percentage of Asian Americans have been bullied since the pandemic. And we have seen so many Asian and Asian Americans and Asian elderly getting attacked on the streets. A lot of Asians are not comfortable going outside. They don't feel safe. They're not going to go and socialize or play sports or be out and about. I mean, I know because I have a lot of friends who are scared to even go to the grocery store. And that's not me making it up. It's me being an Asian, understanding and having conversations that they don't even want to go to the grocery store. Like, they're definitely not going to go play sports.
Last question for you, Jeremy. I've heard you say that you now realize that you live much of your life through the lens of the athlete culture, and you've had to unwire a lot of the ways that you think. Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that? And by unwiring, are you a different person? Is it helping you?
I don't think the mentalities that certain people have are realistic for other people. And so we may see certain athletes or celebrities that go about things a certain way or say things a certain way. And I'm not sure if that can be applied to everybody. And in many ways, I don't even know if those athletes even believe it 100% themselves, that, oh yeah, like I'm completely fearless, or just, like things like man up. Like, what does man up even mean? Right? Like, to me, actually, if I was to man up and, try to be strong, really what that means is to admit that I'm weak when I feel weak and to ask for help when I need help. Because what ends up happening is I try to man up and I don't ask for help. I try to do it on myself, and then I fail, and I fail miserably, and I fail over and over again. And so, a lot of these concepts, does that mean that there's times when you really need to just focus in and go for it and make sure that you hit that game-winning shot or that you make that big? Yes, for sure. But I think that there are many sayings in the athlete culture that get taken too far out of context or get taken too extreme, and that it can have really detrimental effects. And so those are some of the things that I'm learning to unwire. And like I said earlier, even playing the game out of a love and a joy for the game versus you see us elevating, like when someone is just embarrassing somebody else, talking trash to them and completely just disrespecting somebody, and it goes viral. So then everyone wants to kind of try it and do it and like be that person. But that's actually not the purest and the best way to play the game. And it's definitely not the best way to be a person, is to go out there and try to disrespect everybody. It's to play out of a love for the game, love for people, love for your team, love for the sport. And that love will always be the most powerful driving force behind why you can do anything, including sports.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much, Jeremy. That's all the time we have. Thank you for all the work that you're doing with the Jeremy Lin Foundation, with COVID relief efforts, raising awareness about increasing anti-racism, and just really thank you for honest dialogue. I mean, honest dialogue from athletes like you about your own experience really do help kids, helps them know that they're not alone and it's okay to not be okay. So thank you very much, Jeremy.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
High school sports sit at a crossroads. Even before the pandemic, participation had declined for the first time in 30 years, and fewer public high schools were even offering sports. The challenges coming out of COVID-19 now are immense. That's why in 2020, Project Play launched Reimagining School Sports. This multi-year initiative recognizes the essential role that high schools play in preparing young people for life, and the cognitive, educational, and health benefits that flow to students who are physically active. Reimagining School Sports aims to make quality sport and physical activities accessible to all students by identifying strategies that schools can adopt. Adidas, Box, the Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation, and Hospital for Special Surgery partnered with us to launch a national search to identify new ideas to get more students physically active in high school. 8 exemplary high schools will be awarded $20,000 each from our partners. We thank them for their commitment to honor outstanding schools and build lasting change for future generations of high school students. So far, we have announced 6 winners, with 2 more coming later this year. Congratulations to all of these winners. Our charter school winner is ICEF View Park Preparatory School in Los Angeles, California. Against all odds, View Park, a school of 93% black students, is exposing youth to sports they never dreamed of. View Park has no facilities on site to play games, yet it offers 10 high school teams, 5 intramural programs, strength training, cutting-edge PE offerings, and an after-school action sports program with rugby, sailing, and surfing. Our large rural school winner is Jennings County High School in North Vernon, Indiana. A couple years ago, a rumor circulated that some school board members wanted to require all Jennings County coaches to win at least 60% of their games for their contracts to be renewed. The principal worried this would incentivize coaches to prioritize wins over youth development. He hired a new athletic director whose Deserve to Win grid now evaluates coaches in 28 areas, almost everything you can think of except for wins and losses. Our large suburban school winner is Tuscarora High School in Frederick, Maryland. Tuscarora embraces physical activity during school hours as a co-curricular asset tied to education. Many intramural sports are periodically available during daily flex periods. There are unified sports teams in tennis, bocce, and track and field for students with disabilities and the general student body to play together. PE is wildly popular because of caring teachers. As Tuscarora's principal put it, too many high schools assume interscholastic teams meet the needs of all students to be active. In reality, there are many other options. Our large urban school winner is Harding High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. More than half of the students are Hmong Americans, a population that typically doesn't play sports. 15% experienced interrupted education in another country due to war, civil unrest, or migration. Many parents lack the cultural history of sports and discourage their children from playing in order to focus on academics. With a limited budget, Harding recognizes these cultural differences and adapts, using a model that meets students where they're at so they have a positive sports experience. Our private school winner is Trinity School of Durham and Chapel Hill in Durham, North Carolina. Private schools can be well positioned to offer sports because of smaller student bodies and considerable resources. But many students have plans and goals that don't make time for sports participation. Trinity creates 4-year athletic progress plans. This approach is similar to traditional academic plans and helps students meet their potential on and off the field. Our small urban school winner is Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Before SLA opened in 2006, some school district administrators believed SLA students wouldn't want to play sports since it's a project-based school focused on science. Nerds don't play sports was the message the SLA's founding principal heard. Not quite. Today, 40% of the school's students play sports, with many waking up early for morning practices since facilities are hard to find in the afternoon. As one student put it, what used to be annoying early wake-up calls turned into an energizing way to start her day. To learn more about all of our Reimagining school sports winners and to read the reports about different school types, visit as.pn/school sports. Next year, Project Play will release a comprehensive final report with key insights and systems-level recommendations on how to reimagine high school sports.
They aren't just soccer players. Ashlyn Harris, Allie Krieger, Sydney LaRue, and Alex Morgan are change agents, 4 of the most prominent female athletes in the country, whose diverse perspectives and advocacy have helped change the national conversation around sports, from same-sex marriage to protections from coach abuse. Recently, they joined me to explore one of the 8 rights in the Children's Bill of Rights in sports, the right of kids to have fun. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Alex, great to see you. You were at the Project Play Summit last year. And thanks to Go Squeeze, you brought a couple of your friends this time.
Some fellow moms.
That's right. So I want to talk to you about fun, unpacking this idea of what it means, you know, for different kids of different ages. So let's go back to the start. You're 5, you're 6 years old, you're entering sports for the first time. What did sports mean for you at that age? Let's start with you, Allie.
Sport meant a team environment, just to go out and have fun, play freely, not have to feel the pressure of winning. It was just really enjoyable to be around friends and learning, and just enjoy the sport that you love to play. And so I think that is what it represented for me.
Yeah. Sid?
Sport for me, I think, was all about having fun, and especially at a young age, being around my friends and scoring goals, and we still enjoy doing that today. But yeah, that's what sport was to me, and it still is that for me now. I love being around my friends. We love winning, we love scoring goals, and yeah.
Yeah, and Ashley, were you pretty competitive at 5 and 6, or was it just free play, run around, chase the butterflies?
I was a really competitive child, but so I grew up actually playing with boys because I had an older brother. So I felt when I started playing organized sports, it was literally just the freedom to be myself and to have a safe environment where I was fully accepted. And at the time, it didn't matter if I was a girl playing on a boys team. I just really was able to be who I wanted to be in those moments and feel safe and surrounded by people who cared about me. And I think that was why I stuck to it so long. It just, I had this overall sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Were all kids that way at that age, or were there kids on the team who maybe weren't wired to chase their dreams in soccer or whatever else it may be? I think about my daughter. I remember when she was 7 years old, and she was that kid who ran on the outside of the beehive. She did not want to be in the middle of it, right? And the parents are going a little crazy, and some of these girls are on their 9th season of soccer, and Anna checked out for about 3 years. She's like, I thought she was done with team sports. Field hockey came to her town, lacrosse came to her town, nobody knew how to play the game, and she got back into team sports, ended up being all conference in field hockey. But like, are all kids, how do we make room for the kids like Anna so they don't check out of sports when they're 6 and 7 years old?
I mean, I think the coaches really matter. Your environment, like making it more than just about the sport. You know, what I think of when I was younger is like we would all bring snacks to like training and games, and like it was like a family outing. So I think like having support from parents and siblings is big too. And then also giving your child like your son or your daughter the freedom to choose whether they want to play soccer or basketball or an individual sport, maybe swimming, and not forcing them into one thing because that's like the history of our family. My family was a big baseball, softball family, but I didn't want to play softball. I wanted to play soccer more. And so my dad was like, well, okay, I guess I'll have to learn the rules of soccer. With a little resistance, he did. But I think it's things like that make you love like a certain sport more.
So next thing you know, he's telling you to boot the ball down the field, right?
Oh yeah, he had no idea what to say. He was my coach until I was like, okay, Dad, you're gonna have to be a parent now. Like, time to take it to the sidelines.
Yeah. And what do you think? Any other ideas on how to keep those girls in the game?
Yeah, I think it's critical at that age to just allow your kid to be a kid and to do what they want to do that they think is fun. And I think when kids, stop wanting to play, that's when you see a result of parents maybe putting a lot of pressure, or they're only playing one sport and they're forced into playing that one sport. I feel like playing a lot of sports, like when I was young, I played 3 different sports or 4 sometimes. I was in tumbling, I was in basketball, volleyball, soccer. And I feel like you learn also other skills in other sports that you can apply to, soccer if that's your favorite. So I feel like what Alex said, allow your kid to be a kid, allow them to enjoy whatever they want to do, and let them find their own path, and just have that support, like she mentioned, not that pressure.
So sort of like allowing the child to have ownership of the game instead of parents owning the game. But that's kind of hard, right? If you're a parent and your daughter or your son is the one scoring all the goals, and all of a sudden you start getting ideas about getting them on the club team and scholarships and who knows, playing for the national team later on. I mean, how could a parent manage those kinds of emotions and expectations?
I feel like the number one question I get about Cassius, my son, is he going to play soccer? And I'm sure we're all going to hear that, for the rest of our lives. Is our kids going to play? And I think the most important thing is to allow them to be passionate about something. It doesn't have to be soccer. And, like Alex, I came from a baseball family too. And I was in baseball, I played with the boys, I was in Taekwondo, and I think, again, put them in everything and let them choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what did your mother do? Did she talk to you about sports as a kid, or she just signed you up?
Yeah, I mean, my mom is a very athletic woman, and she was a national team player for softball in Canada. And of course, she wanted me to play, baseball and softball like her family, but then she saw me play soccer and she loved it. And I think, that's the most important, just allowing me to be and to do whatever I wanted to do, and she just followed.
Yeah. What do we need to know about what makes what makes sports fun for boys versus girls, right? So we know kids generally play sports for the same reasons. Girls, according to our data, are slightly more likely to play because they want to be with their friends or belong to something that's larger than themselves. They're slightly less motivated to play because they want to win games. Doesn't mean girls aren't competitive, doesn't mean they don't want to win. Every kid is wired differently. But when you hear insights like that, what runs through your mind in terms of how to approach girls and make sure it's an experience that is meeting their needs?
Well, I think girls have a lot of pressures more than boys in terms of just image, who your friends are, you have to excel in all things. And I think boys aren't, those pressures aren't on boys as a young age. Is it right? No, but that's the world we live in today. And so I think for girls, they want to be accepted by their peers, and to have a team to play on, to have teammates and friendships, I think is a huge thing in our confidence and helping us kind of feel confident not only in sport but outside of sport too, with friendships outside of sport, with academics, with hobbies. I think that team environment is a huge confidence and self-belief booster for girls.
Yeah. Any other insights to add?
That's such a great point. I would say also, I don't have all the data between boys and girls or this or that. I just think the importance is maybe changing the conversation and asking the right questions as a kid. So not forcing so much on result, but I can speak for myself and say sport has helped me navigate and gain tools to navigate my life experiences, right? So, I think parents, I know you spoke about this, play such an important role of not being hey, did you win or lose? But what did you learn from this? How do you feel in this moment? What did you enjoy most about today? I think if we can change the conversation and not be so much result driven, we wouldn't feel those pressures, especially as women. We have added pressures on look and likeness and all these different things. So I do think changing our tone and our conversation with our children is important, and not being so results and winning driven. And I think that's when women or young girls start to pull away.
Yeah, just redefining the meaning of success.
Yes. And I think we remind ourselves of that every day too. We're not going to win all the time. We're not going to be successful all the time on the field. And so we can't be defined as humans by the success or how good we are on the field. We're going to have good and bad days. And so we're much more than that. And I have to continue to tell myself to enjoy the journey, because at the end of the day, even if you win, if you had if you weren't confident and you didn't enjoy the process, you're not going to really even enjoy the end result, regardless of winning or losing.
Yep. So let's spin forward. We talked about what fun meant when you're 5 and 6 years old and you're first entering sports. Jump ahead 10 years. Now you're 15 or 16. How does the idea of fun change, if at all? Start. Sid?
Fun for me, I think the competitiveness of that is fun for me. I like to compete, and I think at that age, 14, 15, 16, you're competing at that time. For me, I moved away when I was 14 years old because I knew that I wanted to play on the best team in the world, and that was here. So I moved out of my house in Canada, and I lived with teammates, and I basically, grew up on my own, and it was all about that competition. That's where I found fun.
All agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like that's something that a lot of us had when we were really young, or else I don't think we'd be sitting here. I feel like, you can learn that to a certain extent, but I think that is something that is just inside of each and every one of us that make it to the highest level. We have that certain drive and that dedication and that willingness and want to be competitive. And that is something that I think we just naturally have, and that is what makes this so much fun for us. Then going back to what Ash and Alex said, you do have to just enjoy the journey amongst the competitiveness that we have and that we've instilled in each other over this amount of time. So when you're young, yeah, it's like super fun just to be out there with your team, and then you start to get, okay, well, I'm really good at this, I love winning, and now it's kind of changing into, okay, winning is fun, and then we're winning more often, and that's really fun. And so it's kind of this like, how much more competitive can we be? How much more fun can we have? But they're right, you have to always then go back to
Well, and then in your cases, you had children. And the great thing about having kids is that natural sense of play and joy, right? I mean, so having kids, how has that reminded you, if at all, of just what true play and joy look like in physical movement?
I think true joy is being with my daughter. I never realized that I could be this happy in life. And so if I'm not happy with soccer, you can really tell the difference, because you actually know how happy you are, raising a daughter and son for Sid. So for me, it's kind of knowing that if I'm not happy playing soccer, I can walk away at any moment. There's nothing keeping me there. Life is much bigger than soccer at the end of the day. And so I think about it in terms of, we have finite careers playing soccer, and so I do want to enjoy my last years, however many years that is, of playing. I'm trying to enjoy it as much as possible and bring the joy that I have at home with my daughter onto the field.
So in terms of changing the culture of youth sports to be the best possible culture, what role can mothers play in driving that change? I mean, you're the ones who sign your kids up for sports. You could have conversations with the coaches. You're all famous. You have platforms now. What do you think you can do first and foremost as mothers, and then as mothers who have a platform?
take over the team.
Oh God.
Move over.
This is gonna be a real
We're
treat.
coming in. No, just kidding.
I think supporting moms is the first thing, companies supporting moms, their employers where those moms work, their employers supporting them in order to be able to not only be a mom, but also, still continue to build a business, play soccer, be the soccer coach on your daughter or son's team, be able to do more. You need to be supported, both financially, but also you have to feel like you can do it all. If you're not supporting, you don't feel like you can do it all, then you're limited in that. And so I think we're starting to get to a place in sport where we feel very supported as a mom, and as moms, I feel like 5 years ago, that wasn't really the case.
I mean, one of the things we've seen is that only 1 out of every 4 youth coaches in sports is a woman. And that number hasn't really changed very much, despite Title IX and everything else. So getting more mothers into the game of coaching, we know how important coaches are. Is it that, Alex, just somehow being supportive so not everything is, and you know how busy mothers are already, so to add the coaching of a team, what's the key to lifting that number?
I mean, it's hard because I'm sure a majority, Sid has 2 kids, so it's what is, mothers who have multiple children at home, what are they doing in those moments? Sid was raised by a single parent as well, so it's you understand that more than anyone. it's a little bit difficult, right? So especially when you're a stay-at-home mom or raising a child by yourself.
What is in terms of making soccer as accessible to all kids from all backgrounds, zip codes or otherwise, what's the key there? I mean, how do we make it more racially and ethnically diverse?
I think the prices of youth soccer are outrageous, and I think that a lot of these families who can't afford to, provide that for their child to play on just a club team, or some of the best players go unseen because of the amount of money that parents have to pay into these club teams, and a lot of families can't afford that. They can barely put food on their table, let alone allow their kid to go play on a specific club team in the area. So I feel like that's something that I feel needs to be reevaluated and readjusted in the model that we have at youth soccer, to not surpass some of the best players who might not be able to afford playing, their parents paying thousands of dollars a month just to go play soccer twice a week.
I'll add to that. I think what I'm so proud, especially the women sitting here, is representation. I think that's huge, and clearly you can see by the four of us, we, gay, straight, black, white, I feel like representation is very, very important for our youth. For a child to say, oh, Sydney looks like me, I can do that, I can be Sid. Or, someone looks at Allie and I, and hey, my family looks just like them. And, and Alex, same way. I think representation is huge, and diversity is huge, and that's what I love so much about our team and the women sitting here today is you can identify with so many different people, and I'm hopeful that a young child can see that and say, I want to be that when I grow up.
Sid, anything to add?
I think accessibility, it needs to be accessible for everyone. Are we doing it in schools? Can we put more sports in schools where it is free, where they can decide if that's what they love to do? But again, I agree, it's visibility, feeling that you connect with someone. I think that's really important, and I think we find that a lot more now, not necessarily when we were growing up, but definitely now.
Okay.
I think I was going to add and say just two things going off of what Sid said. Accessibility, it's access to fields as well, in all areas, so all kids can enjoy sport equally, but also for for Orlando Pride and other professional teams, are they providing tickets to families who might otherwise not be able to afford that, to give them that to give them an opportunity to watch us play, and then a young girl or young boy be like, I want to do that when I grow up, because that's what I remember watching a team back in LA, watching Mia Hamm play and being just in awe, oh my God, I can't believe that there's a women's soccer team in the city that I live in. And so to have access for all kids to be able to see that and have role models in front of them, that's important too.
Well, thank you for your advocacy and a really insightful conversation and your time. And we'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Many thanks to Tom and the four amazing athlete mothers for the insightful panel on the importance of fun in youth sports. I am Ivan Girard, President and General Manager at Go-Go Squeeze, and we are proud to be a sponsor of the Project Play Summit. As you heard in the panel, Go-Go Squeeze has partnered with Alex, Ashlyn, Ali, and Sydney to share our goal of ensuring sports are fun and accessible to everyone. In addition to Project Play, there are many other partners helping us achieve our goal. This past week, we released the Fun Comes First playbook, developed in partnership with Lauris USA to provide parents and teachers and coaches and administrators practical information and actionable recommendations to help center youth voices in sports programming. As Project Play's first place says, ask kids what they want. We know that quality sport and play activities centered on the needs of youth athletes improves participation and retention, and in turn, fosters positive outcomes for kids across a range of important development areas. To download the Fun Comes First playbook and learn more on how to implement these practices within your youth sports organization, please visit gogosqueeze.com/funcomes-first.
Well, that's it for us for the moment. Thanks for joining us for opening night of the Project Play Summit. We have a terrific lineup on tap for you tomorrow, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern. We begin with live conversations on bringing sports back better and helping underrepresented communities return to sports, brought to you by Team Snap and ESPN. We thank them for their support as co-presenting sponsors of this year's Project Play Summit, along with the other sponsors who made this event possible and all the learnings, thought leadership, and action that flow from it. The Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, the Hospital for Special Surgery, Go-Go Squeeze, and Good Sport. Tomorrow, we also have sessions on creating local cross-sector collaborations and sport as a tool of cancer prevention in partnership with the American Cancer Society. Did you know that physical activity reduces the risk of 13 types of cancer? Then, for the finale starting at 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll dive deep on how organizations can embed children's rights in sports, how coaches can help kids with mental health challenges, how to get your state to fund youth sports, and how government oversight can improve the state of play. All of these conversations are designed to drive the thought leadership to build a better model for youth sports in America. They also help set up the next Project Play Summit, which, as mentioned earlier, moves to the spring next year. Please do join us March 9th in Washington, D.C., where a network of network leaders convene for the first time in person in 3 years. Reserve your spot now by registering at the URL on this page and in your chat box. Let's do this. Thank you for joining us tonight, tomorrow, and next March.